Good evening, everybody. If we could please stand for the acknowledgement of country and the local government prayer and service acknowledgement. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of our beautiful lands and our surrounding waters, the Ramangeri and the Ngarrindjeri people. As a community, we recognise and respect their cultural connection with that land and with the waters.
Almighty God, we ask you to bless this council and allow for it to be an agent of change to the people of the city and beyond. Direct and prosper its deliberations in honouring of your name and the welfare of the people whom it serves. Amen.
Amen. We gratefully acknowledge the men and women of the Navy, Army and Air Force who made the supreme sacrifice in the preservation of Australia's freedom and our democracy. We also proclaim our gratitude to those who return to us. Please be seated. Welcome everyone to this special meeting of Council on the 3rd of August. It's nice to see a few people in the chamber and the gallery. Thank you very much for taking the time to come and listen to us tonight. And also we have people listening from home on the live streaming. And thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to participate in that. If we move to item 4, which is the beginning of business, we have a motion on notice on the table. Oh, I beg your pardon. I've just been reminded we have an apology from Councillor Charles. We move to item 4, which is business. 4.1, a motion on notice in relation to the 2021 draft capital/operating budget by Councillor Kemp. And the first recommendation is that Council receive and note Councillor Kemp's motion on notice and report. Would someone move that way? Councillor Schofield, thank you. And seconded by? Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Do either of you want to speak to receiving the report? Does anybody want to speak to receiving the report? All those in favour? That's carried, thank you. Councillor Kemp, would you like to propose your motion?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I propose the following motion that the following list of budget bids to be removed from the draft 2021 operating budget. It results to a saving of $269,833 is what I'm asking the chamber to consider to reduce the operating budget. The reason why I've put this motion up is basically with the current economic climate in Australia, and especially within South Australia, I believe we need to be more conservative in our planning and expenditure for this financial year. There's a large capital budget we're embarking on, and certainly capital budgets to provide growth within the community and the businesses and gives opportunity for growth in that area. And I think it's good that we can have a good budget that way. But when we look at the operating budget, to have an extraordinary deficit of $800,000 as well, to me, I just find that a little bit too extraordinary and too far forward in the way of expenditure. We're saying to our community, we recognise your plight with COVID-19 and all the financial restrictions placed upon the community by not having rate rise this year. But on the other hand, we're saying to our community, look at us, we're spending all this money. So I'm not quite sure if that gels. In my mind, it doesn't. That if you go to recognise a plight, then you're putting the council at higher risk because of the long-term impacts. One of the things we haven't done very well in this chamber is to actually identify the long-term impacts of these types of expenditures on capital, because the money we borrow, around $6 million, the repayments on those monies, even though it may not be this financial year, but the ongoing years, it will be increased dramatically. The deficit is not a freebie. We have to pay for that. It has to be paid for at the end of the financial year. And so I just feel that, really, the way things are moving within our economy, and we don't know what the future holds in the way of future grant funding from governments, federal and state, and the way the economy is going, I think we're really biting off a little bit more than we can chew. And it is an ambitious budget, so that's why I'm looking at trying to reduce the budget. And also I believe if it's 800,000, what we're predicting now as a deficit, I think in 6 months' time or more, we'd be over $1 million in deficit. We've already been highlighted by the fact of some deputations that sporting clubs would like some more money, up to the tune around 230,000 to be given to them, either in kind or in loans. We accept that in the this financial year. There's another $200,000 will go in the budget. We're up to $1 million already. And what else is coming we don't know about in the upgrades of various buildings and various areas which we haven't really fully understood the consequences of those types of purchases. The cinema is a classic example. There's some upgrade in the budget for that purpose, but we don't know when you change of ownership in building climates like this, all of a sudden you might be required to upgrade significantly certain areas of disability access as well as fire safety systems. So there are unknown costs that will hit this council within the next 10 months. So that's why I think we need to be conservative from the beginning and give ourselves opportunity to expand if required. That's why I put this motion up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Do I have a seconder for Councillor Kemp's motion? Councillor Robertson, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yeah. I think Councillor Kemp has put the situation very well. I would like to reiterate that, and I'm sure that people in this room would understand that we have yet to really understand the impacts of what we are going to face this year in terms of budget pressures, because we haven't yet seen in this part of the world, perhaps even in Australia yet, the real true impact of the economic impact of the restrictions that are imposed by response to the COVID crisis pandemic. And we really should be keeping our powder dry. I think this is a good effort to reduce the deficit. I was hoping that there would also be in this. No, I'll leave it till the next. The business plan 4.3. But yeah, I think it's an attempt, at least by Councillor Kemp, to say, right, where can we reduce this deficit? And I support him on that.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Does anybody else want to contribute to the debate? Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't be supporting this motion. I think there are just too many essential budget items in this list that need to be in our budget. The first one, for example, coastal review of coastal management study. We've already identified this in various budget workshops to this point in time as a high priority. And if we need a reminder as to why that is, we only have to look at what's happening at Womberal Beach in New South Wales, where houses are washing into the ocean. These coastal reviews provide a framework for managing these threats and hazards into the future, and includes monitoring to gain a better understanding of the triggers and timeframes for implementing adaptation responses to such coastal inundation. We need to ascertain what effects these threats will place on our assets and infrastructure. And in the future, if Encounter Bay is inundated by seawater, or residents of Kyneton and Hayborough are having their homes washed away into the sea, I want to say that at least I was concerned enough to put money into the budget to look at how we could mitigate those actions. The Parks and Gardens increased irrigation costs. Again, I think this is essential. Climate change is real. Global warming is real. Our summers are becoming longer, hotter and drier, and we can't just leave our parks and gardens to frizzle up and die. Trees and parks provide cool spaces in summer. They do this by shading, but also by evapotranspiration. The water that's released has a cooling effect on the surrounding air. Also, by maintaining trees and other vegetation, we help extend their lifespans, and during a tree's life, it continually takes carbon out of the air in the form of carbon dioxide, In other words, it sequesters carbon dioxide. It takes only 15 trees to remove a ton of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere in a year. They're not just part of the carbon cycle. Our vegetation is part of an environmental system for animals, birds, reptiles, insects, etc. They are the home and the food of many of these creatures. They keep our environment healthy, and apart from removing carbon dioxide, they emit oxygen for us all to breathe. The 0.4 full-time equivalent environmental officer position, I believe, is also essential. This position is essential to implement our environmental management plan, and in particular the climate change local action plan, and also research and help implement many of the measures we need to take to mitigate climate change, which we've committed to do. We've seen just in the past week, as I said, homes in Wamberal washing into the ocean, and earlier in the year we saw in coastal communities in New South Wales and Victoria suffer devastating bushfires, which followed on from years of drought and then floods, then the bushfires. And if we think that Victor Harbor couldn't have been one of those communities, then we need to think again, because we could well have been. So we need to recognize that climate change is real. We need to put money into our environmental protection plans and our climate ready plans. And so I believe these budget items are essential in the forthcoming budget. We need to start doing something. Climate change is a much bigger threat than COVID-19.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Does anybody else want to say something? Carol? Councillor Schofield?
Look, I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Henderson. The environmental issue is real. Our community are expecting all levels of government to do something about it, and we are one of those tiers of government. We have a responsibility to our community now and into the future to start putting strategies in place. The parks and gardens, I believe, are extremely important. One is we're a tourist destination, and our community rely on the income generated from that sector, as well as jobs created from tourism. With COVID in the fore at this time, it's very important that we have open spaces for our community to enjoy, especially if further restrictions are in place. At least they can walk into the parks with their children and play on the green grass. So I won't be supporting this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Is there any further debate before I ask guests? Councillor Littley and then Councillor Glasbrook.
I also won't be supporting this. I do appreciate the work that you've put in there, Councillor Kemp. I do appreciate that there are some savings there that I would support, but I'm concerned with regards to those factors that relate to the environment, and I support Councillor Schofield, her comments in that I see a public and a community and visitors very much valuing that open space and what we can do to build that up and also protect our environments. I see that as a fairly key thing going forward. I've seen it in my own work experience that I'm seeing the benefit of having those open spaces. And yes, I know that there's open spaces all around us that people are turning to and looking at, but I feel that as a council we should be not putting those on the back burner. If this recommendation carved out those environmental things, I would probably have a different view on it if it was sort of the top half was left in and the bottom half was left out. And like I said, I do appreciate what you're trying to achieve here, and I wish I could support it to have some cost savings, but with those environmental factors in there, those costings there, I can't, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Little. Councillor Glasbrook.
No, I won't be supporting it either, but I also wish to congratulate Councillor Kemp on his effort. He feels these things are not as important as others, and I can assure you there are many things that aren't on this list that I don't think are important that should be and maybe could be left out of the budget, but we've been through a process and we've got what we've got. I mean, there's about $800,000 worth of stuff I'd like to pull out of it because I don't believe we should have a deficit budget. But so I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you. I agree with your intent entirely, but I can't agree with everything that you've got in here either. So, cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor Hales.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. It'll come as no surprise to anyone probably that I similarly won't be supporting this. And I guess part of it comes down to, as Councillor Glasbrook just highlighted, we've been through a process over the last 7 months now, getting to this point of the budget. And there are things in this budget that individually around the room, we as individuals would not support. But the fact that the process is 6-7 months long is to get to a point where the budget is something that a majority of elected members support in principle. It's that collective decision making versus individual decision making. I'd also like to highlight the fact that while I certainly don't like the fact that we're in a deficit position, we've been in far worse deficit positions in the past, and not like the 90s that passed. 2011, this council adopted a deficit position that in numerical terms was almost double this deficit. And they didn't have COVID. They didn't have an extenuating circumstance as such. In terms of a ratio percentage though, their operating deficit ratio at that point would be negative 12%. This is a negative 3% budget deficit ratio. And in terms of net liabilities, they were carrying over $21 million in debt, where we're only proposing at the end of this financial year to be at 17, which their net financial liability ratio was 78%, ours is 59%. We're in the middle of a global crisis, and we're in the middle of restructuring a lot of what council does. So when you step back from it and look at it in that historical setting, council has come back from a far worse position before, and possibly with not the same issues being dealt with, which makes this budget, to me, very acceptable as it is. And so I can't support the motion in front of us tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Just to reiterate some of the views around the chamber, I agree with the intent that Councillor Kemp is going with, and I think whilst everyone would agree that a lower budget and is ideal, but in the circumstances, and as Councillor Hales has just very well described and painted that picture of, I think it is a very acceptable budget to go with, and I agree that it has been a long process and there will be things in there that individually we'll all see a little bit differently, but that's how the process works. I guess just picking on the environmental aspect, I think, and which also, and contributing to why I won't be voting for this motion, is that one Monday, being last Monday, we are saying how we want to do more to protect the environment, how we can't just be all talk and how we have to have action. And then the week later, we're trying to pull out environmental projects and initiatives. So that just doesn't really work in my perspective on it. So that's, again, another reason why I won't be supporting this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Kemp, would you like to close the debate?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins, and thank you everybody for your input. It's interesting to hear the conversations as to why members are not supporting it, and yes, a 7-month program to go through this, but I guess, you can always look at our process and debate that, whether it was a good process or indifferent process. But we've got to this position, but certainly I've not wavered from my position of trying to reduce the deficit all the way through the program, because I still believe what I said at the beginning. The issues around the environmental stuff, we do a lot of work in this space already, and I think we're doing a great work to the staff, what they're achieving. I don't see these as essential parts to enhance the coastal review study. It's only looking at a study of the impacts of the ocean movements. We've done studies before. I don't think there'd be much difference in the study process, what will come out of it in that context. As for the watering, this is additional money above what we already pay already in a large budget. We have reserves of A, B, C class reserves, and I'm not saying we don't water anything. I'm just saying we look at the reserves. We don't need to water as a dry park policy where, you know, and not talking about closing down open spaces, not having open spaces as people have been saying. It's really about, we have a lot of open space which is dry. It doesn't get watered, and it's just natural. That's the beauty of our land, our landscape. Well, I'm talking about reserves, which really are examples down Franklin Parade, little grass terrace of grass here and there, which is watered at a cost. Do we need to be watering that? They're the types of things that we need to review and reduce those costs. And I've said before, this is about additional, because this came about because of a bit longer summer. So we've got to keep the watering up. We don't need to keep the watering up in some reserves. Some reserves need watering. I agree. Our grass reserves like ovals and that for sporting, they need watering for sure. So this is about trying to make some hard decisions, and you know, we should not be afraid of making hard decisions, irrespective of how our community sees it. Sometimes the community has to accept that this is our climate, this is what we're in, and this is how we have to operate. And we have to be bold enough to make those decisions and not just keep ticking and flicking as things come up because it's, well, I don't know, personal positions, I suppose. But I understand this is not going to get up, but that's fine. The process has been done, and but I just think that we've got to be mindful that, you know, we've got to be also stand up and put our hand up that if it does go pear-shaped, you know, we made the wrong decision, and admit it to our community and promise them we won't do it again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. That closes the debate. I'll now put it to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That motion is lost. Thank you.
Division, please.
Certainly. All those in favour can stand up. Corinne, if you can let me know when you're ready, because I don't have a screen. No. So for Councillor Robertson and Councillor Kemp. And against, Councillor Mann. Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor Littley. Councillor Schofield. Councillor Henderson and Councillor Hales. That motion is lost. So we now move to item 4.2, page 9. which is the Community Plan 2030. And the first motion is that Council receive and note the Community Plan 2030 report, including the public consultation feedback presented at the designated informal gathering that was held on the 20th of July. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Littley, and seconded by Councillor Hales. Do either of you want to speak to that? No? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Glasbrook.
Just a question in relation to the email that elected members would have received about the population growth. Are those figures going to be altered if they are incorrect?
Through the Mayor, if I may. So those figures were updated in the community plan and the annual business plan. There was an email that was sent regarding the economic development strategy, but there was another set of data that was used that was done in 2018. And yes, that is being updated prior to that document going out for community consultation. So the data in these documents is all up to date as per the DIPTI report that was provided.
Any further comments? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried, thank you. The second motion is that pursuant to section 122 of the Local Government Act 1999, Council adopts the City of Victor Harbour's Community Plan 2030 as presented. Moved by Councillor Henderson. And do we have a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Schofield. Do either of you like to speak to that? No? Does anybody want to speak to that? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. All those against? That's carried, thank you. We now move to item 4.3, which is the 2021 Annual Business Plan. The first recommendation is that Council receive and note the Annual Business Plan report, including the public consultation feedback presented at the designated informal gathering held on Monday the 20th of July. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Hales. And seconded by Councillor Schofield. Would either of you like to speak to that? Would anybody like to speak to that? Councillor Kemp.
Just a question, thanks. In the documentation we were given, I've noticed that the public community feedback in this one here has the community plan feedback. Is that going to make a difference to the documentation as presented? Because one of the recommendations is the information was here as per attachment A, which is the community plan public consultation feedback, not the annual plan consultation feedback.
Kelly?
Thank you, through the Mayor. So we did receive a late feedback from the high school, and that in its entirety has been included in here with commentary in the report around receiving that late but wanting to give it to elected members. So it does have the draft community plan feedback on page 98 with the annual business plan and budget feedback on the following page.
Through the Mayor, page 65, 66 is community plan consultation feedback, 68 it goes on, so this is anyway, yeah, that's fine. It doesn't make any difference to our decision making. I'm just, it's just that the information is mostly not represented correctly.
Are there any further comments or debate in relation to that second recommendation? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried, thank you. Item 4.5, sorry, 4.4.
Number 2.
Sorry?
You only did one. You now need to do number 2 or 4.3.2.
4.3.
Number 2.
I thought I did number 2. Recommendation 2. Recommendation 1, noting it, was Councillor Henderson and Councillor Schofield. Recommendation 2 was Councillor Hales.
That was the one before.
That was the one before? I beg your pardon. Sorry. Okay. Recommendation 2. The second recommendation is that pursuant to section 123 of the Local Government Act, Council adopts the 2021 Annual Business Plan, subject to final budget adoption and declaration of rates. Moved by Councillor Henderson and seconded by Councillor Schofield. Thank you. Do either of you want to talk to that? No? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Robertson?
Just some questions, if I might. Page 62, at the very bottom, this added statement in there, I think it's important that we highlight that at least as far as we know with this COVID pandemic, but we're talking about just this financial year that we're in, that we want to make it clear that the differential, the freezing of a differential on fixed charges is only for 2021. So I would suggest that after the word fixed charge, which is the second bottom line on the right-hand side, that insert in there for 2021 or 2020-21 being frozen at 1920 levels. Otherwise, it looks as though it's going to go on forever. And
I'll just ask Kelly to respond to that before you go on to your next question. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, through the Mayor. So in terms of that, the wording there, Councillor Robertson, it does have 2021 at the end of that sentence, that as a result, a once-off rate freeze on the differential rate and fixed charge has been adopted for 2020-21. So we have just specified that it is for the 1 year only as a once-off for 2021. Is that what you were after?
No, on page 62 of the agenda, on the bottom of that page.
Fixed charge description. The fixed charge he's saying should be specifically only frozen for that year.
Thank you, through the Mayor. If I can just add to that, in terms of that table on that page, what we've actually put in the annual business plan highlights what we've done and the process that we've gone through. So I'm not sure that changing the table on that page will make it was more a description about what we have changed rather than the specific wording that ended up in the annual business plan.
Through the Mayor, sorry, Councillor Robertson, if I can just clarify, if you have a look on page 4 of the annual business plan and budget that's attached, the highlighted section which talks about financial sustainability, it does specifically state, as a result of once-off rate freeze on the differential rate and fixed charge has been adopted for 2021. So it has been updated within the document to specify what you want to say. And this document is only the 2021 annual business plan and budget.
Yeah. Because there was further on I think it's in the next item, 4.4, a statement that indicated that it might go on for longer. I don't know whether to raise it here or in 4.4, but on page 63, we have put into the budget item for page 31 in the middle there, which is updated KPA funding allocation for the Wales Centre lift and air conditioning. I get it about the air conditioning. I'm not sure about the lift. One of the issues here.
Sorry, have you got a question?
Yes. Okay. Do we absolutely have to include in the budget a $100,000 for the lift?
That lift, Councillor Robertson, is so that the Wales Centre building becomes DDA approved, disability discrimination approved. The council has in the past been taken to the Equal Opportunity Commission because we don't have disability access to the lift. The money from that lift for that lift construction has been received from a government grant, and so it's not money that we need to borrow in relation to that.
I guess the issue for me is that what are we doing with that building in the long term? Is money spent in a tough financial year's budget going to be recouped at a later stage in terms of the building itself? Is it going to remain forever? My understanding that we as a council discussed this some weeks back, and that there was a lot of talk at that time about the Wales Centre building having potentially being used for something else. So money spent on it at this point in time, given pressures on the budget or opportunities to use the money elsewhere. That this is putting 100,000 into a lift there is, to me, it's putting the cart before the horse. But anyway, if that's all there is for it, yep.
Does anybody else want to speak? If Councillor Kemp.
Yeah, I'm not going to support this annual business plan. I think it's ambitious, and holistically, when you look at the whole plan as well, and how you're going to fund that plan, I think that I have concerns that we don't have the capacity or the capability to deliver this ambitious plan. I think we'll fall short of it, and really we're setting ourselves up, and I think we're setting our community up if we don't deliver on everything that's been stated. Even in the motion that was lost that I put up, we may not be able to deliver some of that. And to me, that is a problem. I think we should work within our means and our area of abilities. So that's why I'm not supporting it. It's too ambitious, and I just feel that we just won't be able to deliver it.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Is there any further debate? If not, I'll put it to the floor. Unless Councillor Henderson, you have anything that you want to say in closing? No. I'll put the recommendation to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you.
Division, please.
Certainly. All those in favour, please stand. Councillor Mann. Councillor Littley. Councillor Robertson. Councillor Schofield. Councillor Henderson and Councillor Hales. And against, Councillor Kemp and Councillor Glasbrook. That motion is carried. We now go to item 4.4, the 2021 budget. And the first item is that Council receive and note the 2021 budget report. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Schofield. And seconded by Councillor Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. The second motion is that pursuant to section 123 of the Local Government Act, Council adopt the 2021 budget as presented in the budgeted financial statements provided at attachment A, forecasting net capital expenditure 11,837,900 and an operating deficit of $871,900. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson. And seconded by? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Glasbrook and then Councillor Robertson.
Yes, thank you. And I'd like to thank the staff for all of their efforts in preparing this and going through this process. As you know, and as I stated at our last meeting, I won't be supporting this. I don't believe that we should have a significant deficit. It's just not the way I've ever lived my life, and I don't believe it's the way that this council should live its life. I have concerns of how we're going to turn this deficit around unless we significantly change some of our habits and some of our things that we're spending our money on currently into the future. I've struggled to see how we'll turn this around certainly in the short term. And I'm not in favour of borrowing up to $6 million. I personally don't believe it'll be that much, but whatever, $4 million. At the moment, sure, we may have been in more debt in the past. I'm not sure of that, but this is not the end. That's the problem. If this was the end, if we're at this point and saying, listen, if we just do this little bit of money, we'll be finished, we'll have achieved these things that we want. But in my opinion, this potentially could just be the beginning, considering some of the things that may be in the pipeline. So again, I won't be supporting that level of debt, considering there could be more debt coming into the future. So I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor Robertson.
Just a couple of questions. Just a couple of questions to begin with, please, Mayor. On page 102, the additional net capital expenditure items that have been added, about $500,000 worth been added to the budget. The second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth ones, these are works in progress. The question for the CEO perhaps is that these are items that were budgeted for in last financial year, 1920, and haven't been completed. So, but then is the budget funds from last year carried over, or does that mean we have to, the items that are in here that are now additional budget items, because the cost of these projects went up, or because we can't transfer money out of last financial year and therefore we have to find new money in this financial year's budget?
Kelly may want to elaborate. So through the Mayor, they aren't additional, the projects haven't gone over budget. The projects haven't been able to be completed in the last financial year, so they've been whipped around, as in those monies have been, through capitals, have been transferred to the 2021 financial year to enable those projects to be finished, and they're only the capital projects. There's no operating items, obviously, that can be whipped around, but these are just capital items. Kelly, did you wish to add anything further?
Yeah, thank you. Through the Mayor. So in terms of the unspent budget for those items that were uncompleted, it is just that, a budget. It isn't actually money sitting anywhere in an account. So the budget hasn't been expended. What we're doing is bringing forward to council to show we actually need these monies budgeted in the 2021 financial year so that we can complete them.
If I may follow up with that question, because I'm still a little bit uncertain as to what this means. These are projects that were started last financial year and they weren't finished inside the financial year. So if, as the CEO says, money was allocated, so it can be carried over. So this is additional money going into those projects from out of this year's budget. Does that mean that these are cost overruns on those projects?
Through the Mayor, no. As the CEO said, they're not cost overruns. In terms of the budget for last year, if we had a budget of $1 million and we expended 900,000 of that, but the project wasn't completed, there's $100,000 that council didn't need to borrow. But what we're saying to you in that 2021, we actually need $100,000 to finalise the project. And whether that comes out of borrowings or depreciation funds or surplus funds, it doesn't really matter. But it's not money as such that's being transferred, it's a budget allowance that's coming across.
Okay. I'm just here. The first item on this list, which is the caravan park. I think it's good to see that this there has been some additional funds made available for the fire system works on that park, but I don't know if this is the full amount that's required, and if it's not the full amount required, then do we have a plan in place for what is going to be done and when to complete the full requirement of the fire system works? In other words, is there a plan for this work to be completed? It's not going to be finished in 2021. So is there a plan for how it's going to be finished in the years thereafter?
So through the Mayor, these 45,000 is in addition to what was already budgeted for as a result of recommendations made by our property team from a fire safety audit that was undertaken, or independent audit. The Building Fire Safety Committee, while they haven't met formally, have been in consultation with our property team, and this is why the increase of 45,000 has been placed in the budget to enable council to have sufficient funds to implement, once finalised, the Building Fire Safety's recommendations for addressing the building fire safety requirements in the caravan park. It is anticipated that those works will be undertaken in the 2021 financial year. That's why the budget amount is allocated in there.
Okay. On the next page, 103, these are operating budget, various savings and additions that have been made. The Local Government's Grants Commission advanced grants for June 2021. Are we fairly sure that this 170,000 is coming our way?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, based on historic trends, yes. We haven't received, there's been 1 year that we haven't received advance payments in about the last 15. So I would say that it's reasonably certain that we would get advance payments as an ongoing concern. The state government and Commonwealth seem to like to empty their coffers in terms of grants and things in June, and it's continuing to be a trend. So that's why we've included it in the budget.
Another question on the property and GIS, on the property and GIS, the completion of land and building revaluations. These are valuations done by our own team on our own land, or this is something done by the Valuer General?
Thank you. Through the Mayor again. So it's not done by the team, although our team, our internal team does have a large part in it. It's done by an external valuer under the accounting standards. So we're required to do revaluations on our land and buildings every 4 years every 5 years as a minimum. And so we have to undertake those revaluations on a set schedule. Land and buildings were programmed to be done in 1920. However, COVID-19 meant that the company doing them couldn't get here and undertake them in time for them to be completed. So this is a requirement under accounting standards and under our audits for our financial statements. So it's works that have to happen unless council wants a qualified audit opinion when we have our financial statements done.
Okay. The next item there, the streetscaping, a maintenance contract for the Main Street precinct. I believe this is, I stand to be corrected, but I believe this is something I haven't seen before. What exactly is this maintenance contract? What is being maintained?
Thank you. Through the Mayor. So it isn't something that you've seen before, it is new. In terms of the upgrades to the main street, the contract surrounding those includes a capital component, and it also includes a maintenance period where the contractor is required to perform certain maintenance on that area, and this is an operating cost, so it needed to be pulled out of the capital and set aside into operating for them to continue to maintain that upgrade for the term of their contract.
Why wouldn't it, as through the Mayor, why wouldn't that be a cost to them? Why is it a cost to us?
Through the Mayor, as part of the contract, it actually specifies in there that they will undertake those works at a set price for a set period of time.
Okay. I come back to the issue I raised before at the bottom of page 103, just the very last couple of words there. It says the review of the asset management plans and long-term financial plans programmed for mid-August to set out a plan for the next 10 years in the context of providing a once-off differential rate freeze. I didn't quite understand those last half dozen words.
Thank you. Through the Mayor again. So what we're basically saying there is that, one, not only do our asset management plans and our long-term financial plan need a review, but there will also be ongoing impacts from having a differential and fixed charge rate freeze in 2021. And our long-term financial plan projected or assumed that we would have rate rises in each year around CPI. That's not the case for this year. So we need to actually adjust that and show what the on-flow effects over the next 10-year period would be. So we can provide a revised 10-year forecast.
Okay. In terms of the operating budget, again, page 103, my understanding was that the proposals for this year for the merger of the Whale Centre and the Visitor Information Centre would result in a budget saving for us. I don't see anything in this table here that I think it was something of the order of $150,000.
Through the Mayor, the reason for that is a number of our staff are permanent staff, and so with a transition period and a no forced redundancies clause in our enterprise agreement, it will take some time for council to realise that estimated $150,000 per annum saving. It'll be achieved through natural attrition over a period of to be determined.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Councillor Henderson, do you want to close the debate? No? If not, I'll put the vote to the motion to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you.
Division, please.
All those in favour? Councillor Mann? Councillor Littley? Councillor Schofield? Councillor Henderson? And Councillor Hales? And those against? Councillor Glasbrook? Councillor Robertson and Councillor Kemp. That motion is carried. And in carrying that motion in relation to the budget, I'd like to thank the staff and Kelly very much for all of the work that they have done. And I'd like to thank my fellow elected members for all of the work that you have all done. I think we've had 10 workshops in relation to that. It certainly is a reflection of our business plan, which is a really good thing. No rate rise, which is what the community wants, and considerable assistance to our community during this very difficult time. So thank you very much to everybody. It's been a big team effort, and I know a very stressful time for many people. We now move on to item 4.5, which is the rate declaration. The recommendation, the first recommendation is that pursuant to section 167 of the Local Government Act, Council adopts for the rating purposes of the Valuer-General's valuation of capital values for land within the council area for the year ending 20th of June 2021 of 4,429,000, no, that's 4 million, no, yes. 420, sorry? 4,429,236,440. Gee, that's a big number. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Hales. And do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Do either of you want to speak to it? No? Does anybody want to speak to that? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously, thank you. I won't read that second recommendation out because it is quite long, and I'll take it as read. Would someone like to move recommendation 2? Thank you, Councillor Kemp. And seconded by Councillor Littley. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to it? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. Recommendation 3, that pursuant to section 151 and 152 of the Local Government Act, Council adopts a fixed charge of $3.90 to be imposed on rateable property within the council area. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Robertson, thank you. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Mann, thank you. Either of you want to speak to that? Anybody want to speak to it? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. Recommendation 4, once again, is quite long, and I'll take that as read. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Hales, thank you, and Councillor Henderson seconding that. Do either of you want to speak to it? Does anybody want to speak to it? I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. Recommendation 5. I'll take that as read. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Hales, thank you. And do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Schofield. Either of you like to speak to that? Would anybody like to speak to it? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously, thank you. Item 6, I'll take that as read, and that relates to the mandatory rebates as detailed in attachment A, moved by Councillor Henderson and seconded by Councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to it? All those in favour? That's carried unanimously, thank you. Item 6, which relates to the discretionary rebates, I'll take that item, item 7, relates to discretionary rebates, and I'll take that as read. Does someone want to move that way? Councillor Kemp, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Henderson, thank you. Either of you want to speak to that? Do you want to speak to it, Councillor Kemp? No. Does anybody want to speak to it? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously, thank you. And item 8, pursuant to section 181 of the Local Government Act, Council declares that rates for the year ending 30th of June 2021 will be payable in a single instalment due on the 30th of September 2020 or by quarterly instalments due on 30th September 2020, 8th of December 2020, 8th of March 2021 and 8th of June 2021. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson, thank you. And Councillor Schofield seconding that. Either of you want to speak to that? Anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, thank you. I have a question out of this. Does this preclude people having the ability to pay in more frequent instalments? So this year we're not offering any people pay quarterly. That's it.
No, it does not exclude them from paying any other arrangements. So we have provisions in place for people to make contact with us to put payment plans in place, as we have always had in place, even prior to COVID.
Okay, so through the Mayor, do we need to, or should we include in that except by prior arrangement or something else at the end, or is it, that's it?
It's not necessary. You're required as a council to legally declare and move a resolution as to when your structured payment plans would be in place. This is what you're doing. This council also has other payment plans and policies in place which would come into effect regardless.
Okay.
Any further questions or comments from the floor? Is there anything that you want to say in closing debate, Councillor Henderson? No? I'll put it to the floor then. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. And there are no confidential reports for council decisions, and I now declare the meeting closed at 6:30. Thank you very much once again. Thank you for those people that are listening at home, I should say, and please don't hesitate to get in touch with any of your elected members if you've got any queries or you want to talk through anything that you're not sure of.